So yeah, I'm Tim Tier. I'm with Biodiversity Research Institute, a nonprofit in the US, and I am working in partnership with Mark Ritchie at Soils for the Future, essentially trying to promote soil carbon projects on rangelands around the globe. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to turn my video off so I don't lose too much bandwidth here, but I want to thank everyone for welcoming me to this fantastic assemblage of individuals, and it's a great honor for me to be here. Yeah, so 2018 was a big year. Two key studies, land degradation and restoration by IPBES and the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. They both showed that we have major crises on the planet, and these were really landmark publications, but I'm sure most of everybody's aware of them. A key one I want to point out, though, as the chairman of today's session from the UNCCD referred to, is that the Convention on Desertification refers to the fact that land degradation is a key problem facing the planet, and that sustainable land management are really the most important actions that we can take that will help both establish ecosystem-based adaptation as well as address climate change. And these are good for both biodiversity and for people. They call out land degradation neutrality and focus on sustainable land management. And I want to hold on to that thought, and I'll come back to it in a bit. In 2019, climate change discussion heated up. We had two things happen. We had a report that said that emissions were continuing to increase, and that basically the challenges that faced us were real. And similarly, there was a real focus on natural climate solutions or nature-based solutions that basically said we really need to pay attention to the way land and land management feature in the way we should think about climate change. Then came 2020, and we all know what happened. There was a great pandemic, which we're still in the midst of today, but a critical issue happened there, which was essentially the overnight collapse of the tourism industry. And that had huge impacts around the planet, but particularly in Africa, where tourism is such a critical part of the finances that support protected area management. So as we emerge from 2020, a couple things happened. We first came directly into the UN's Decade of Ecological Restoration, and a focus on restoration, and that is driving a great deal of attention now, particularly at the EU with its new Green Deal. Another major development here that's particularly important to this presentation today is the emergence of 2015 net zero targets, which I'm assuming people have heard about. They've heard about it because many major companies are committing, like with the land degradation neutrality movement of the UNCCD, to stop land degradation. This is to prevent companies and countries from emitting more carbon into the air than they sequester. And the challenge with doing that, of course, is particularly many of these companies are recognizing that two things are happening. They can't actually achieve net zero targets unless they offset their carbon in some way. And that is having an impact on the fact that many private companies are also looking to buy more carbon credits, and as a result of that, carbon prices are increasing on the carbon market. For a quick overview, for those of you that aren't involved with the carbon market, there are essentially two types of carbon accounting and two types of carbon projects, and very simply stated, those that are avoiding the loss of carbon, and those come from, for example, if you are conserving a tropical forest in the Amazon and it has carbon on it and you're preventing it from being lost to a parking lot, or a project where there's sequestration. The atmosphere of all of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of the planet is captured in the top meter of soil on the Earth. And in fact, there are 3 to 4 times as much carbon in the soil as there are in the atmosphere. And that plants are the important connector between the transfer of CO2 in the air and putting carbon in the soil. So therefore, management of vegetation is a key thing we have to pay attention to. Another flashback to 2014, there was an important work that was done by my colleague Mark Ritchie at Soils for the Future, and he had looked at many years of research in Serengeti National Park that eventually showed that there are two ecological processes that man can manage that are particularly important for soil carbon. The first one is that if you alter grazing intensity and increase the numbers of herbivores on land, that you can increase the amount of soil carbon. It's the graph on the upper left. And on the graph on the lower left, you can see that as fire frequency increases, soil carbon decreases. So these are two management efforts that we have as tools as land managers that can influence soil carbon. So I'm first going to focus on the grazing management component. Many of you have heard about holistic grazing or grazing management plans, but in essence, that if you just let livestock wander around through an unplanned grazing strategy, it is not nearly as productive or as positive as if you actually bunch animals together and instill a certain type of rest rotation system. So the question is, does that concept work in reality? I want to fast focus to northern Kenya, which is where the first and only really large-scale landscape restoration project related to soil carbon is happening. And this is important because it is also an extremely arid area, very similar to areas in the Sahelo-Saharan region. The first question, can grazing management really be successful in reducing grazing impacts? If you just focus in on the two figures on the left and look at the purple areas are areas that were being degraded before the soil carbon was launched. In 2014, you can see that this has dramatically changed years later. Similarly, the next question is, if you do that, will you actually see carbon stored in the soil? And the graph on the right shows that in multiple different soil types, in two different soil types and multiple different types of grazing systems, we actually can increase the amount of carbon in the soil. These are two really key proof of concepts. The second issue was about fire. Another study that we did in Zambia, also in 2014, showed that if you shift the way fires are burning from late dry season to early dry season, you can also increase the amount of carbon in the soil. Together, these two concepts form the idea of a carbon project, and in northern Kenya, there are currently over 2 million carbon credits for sale in northern Kenya related to its grazing management. So what does this mean for Sudan and Sahel? So I just wanted to say, using those models, looking at the Nikolo Koba National Park in Senegal, what you see here are both patterns evident, that the red areas are where there is too much fire and the blue areas where fires have disappeared. And that's because of both fire regimes that are out of whack and too much grazing. Together, the estimates using models show that if you influence fire inside the park, that could generate carbon revenues at the current prices at about $11 million a year. And if you outside the park, working in local communities, if you manage grazing, it could also create around $3 million a year. These are just estimates that come from the model, but they demonstrate that if you have carbon projects that focus on grazing and fire, that this could be a really important source of new revenue for your area. So thank you.